Okay, so welcome to our little introductory session on R. R is the language that you're going to be using throughout the class. Um, and one thing I will say about learning R is you can't really do enough of it. So if you want to really learn the skill beyond getting a grade, beyond getting your grade, then there's just so much information out there. I try and help you a little bit by giving you links throughout the notes to additional resources, but the more you can do on your own, the better you're going to get. R is not an easy skill to learn, but it's a useful skill. And the reason why it's in demand is because it's not easy. So not everybody can do it. You know, just some advantages of R. It's probably the most widely used basic tool for data scientists. Kind of purer programmers maybe use Python a little bit more, but R is a very widely used tool. It just contains so many techniques because when academics develop new techniques, they put it into R. There's extensions for dealing with big data sets. And now Microsoft own R Studio. Microsoft have been putting out versions of R that are a little bit faster than the standard version and a little bit more scalable. We've got R Studio, which is relatively user friendly. And one really nice thing about R is it has some very nice graphics. You can do some very nice statistical graphics or just normal graphics for your report. And the best of all, it's free. Now, the disadvantage is, there is this steep learning curve. It's not what we call point and click. It can be a little confusing, like you can do the same thing about 10 different ways. So there is this, it does take a while to get a hold of. Um, you know, and it's maybe not quite as reliable as something like SAS. So just comparing it to some of its competitors, um, as I said, we use R here. Python, I couldn't really teach it without a programming prerequisite because it requires a lot more in terms of programming concepts. It's easier to do R with simple code segments. Um, SAS is kind of used a lot in industry, maybe less than it used to be. Doesn't have as many techniques as R, but what it does have is, very reliable production tested techniques. So things where mission critical will often use SAS. SPSS, we teach it in the marketing department here, primarily marketing researchers and behavioral researchers, and Stata primarily used by economists. But certainly over the last 5 years, the big two tools are R and Python. If you learn R in this class and somehow you can learn Python yourself, then you'll be pretty well set up for data science jobs. And on the first class, we'll talk a little bit more about that. Okay, so I do provide you with quite a lot of information. And if you go to the notes and there's all these different tutorials, do check some of them out. Because again, just as much as you can do, it really will help you as you get through the course. Most of the homeworks and exercises at the beginning will be pretty simple. You take my code and you maybe change one thing. But as we get through the course, you need to have a little bit more intuition and skill, and that can only be gained by doing. A nice little one is the parody. It's I think the fifth one down, and that goes right from the basics, and it's pretty kind of comprehensive. You go right from just typing in values of numbers to doing some quite sophisticated graphics. So again, there's just so much information out there on R, and it really is a case of, learning on your own. Having said that, I provided instructions for installing on Windows and on the Mac. First, you have to go to the R website, and download R. The current version is 4.02, so just click on that and follow through all the instructions. You want make sure I think it will install both, but when you're running it, you do want the 64-bit version. And then, after you've installed R, you need to go to the RStudio website and download RStudio. And yeah, you don't want to pay you might want to pay the $995, but this is basically the free version of RStudio. Is the one you want, and that basically has everything that you need to know for this class. So let's open up RStudio, and here I've got this code. I've got the first few weeks code. A few little things. You can check, about RStudio, and that tells you the version of RStudio that you have. You've got kind of, if you want to check for updates, and if you've got the help files, there's some pretty kind of comprehensive kind of help files and tutorials out there. Another interesting thing is you go to Tools, go to Global Options. This here is important because the top, don't worry about, the layout too much at the moment, but this is where you actually tells you which version of R you're using. It should default to the 64-bit version of the one you installed last, but you can actually change this and pick, if you've got more than one version of R, you could actually pick a different version. The other thing you might want to look at if you go down to Appearance, if you just go down to the editor font size, for me at the moment that is size 16, and this is usually because I have it a little bit bigger when I'm trying to demonstrate. When I'm coding, I have it a little bit smaller. But the default font size is like really, really hard to read. So you might want to actually make your font size a little bit bigger. But just again, there's good help, so just play around with your options. The next thing, which is kind of important, is you want to have a directory where you save all your R files. So if we go to Documents, and you will actually, if you have a PC, you will have a Documents/R. And generally, you can see I do a lot of R coding because all of my different projects are in subdirectories of this. But ideally, what you want to do, so this class is called BQAAnalytics, and I have all the files for this class in BQAAnalytics. Now, what you want to do, what this is doing here, this first kind of command, this is setting the directory. This little squiggle sign says we're going to the base R directory, which is under Documents, and then I'm using the BQAAnalytics directory. This setwd just tells you which directory you're using, and you do need the directory because you need to kind of, first you want to copy the code files from the website and load them, and then you'll begin to kind of build and save your own files. Now, you don't, you can actually do this by the GUI. So you go to Session, Set Working Directory, choose Directory, and lo and behold, it's BQAnalytics already, because that's what I was before, and I click Open, and you can see it will actually generate that code for you. So just a few things. This thing here is called the console. This is where you type in commands. So say I want to create a variable called A and make it equal to 5. I do this. These two arrows is just the R equivalent of equals. And in fact, you can actually use equals as well. These two are exactly the same. I type in A, it's 5. Now let's set B to also be 5. And I could type out A plus B, which is 10. Or I could create a value of C, which is A plus B, and then C is 10. So that was my basic arithmetic. So this is the console. This is where you type. You can type your code. Now, what you don't want to do is like type all of your code for homework in the console and then close your RStudio, because then you'll lose all your code. And that always happens to at least one student every semester. So ideally what you want to do then is you want to save your code in files. Now, there's two kind of main ways of writing code. One is just to write a script, which you run in the console, and the other is to kind of create functions which do certain jobs, and then you call the functions. We're not going to put, this isn't really a programming course. We're not going to put too much. We might utilize a few functions later, but for the moment, just realize a script is somewhere where you save your code. So we do file, new file, R script, and I'll call it maybe Stephen's R script. And I'll put my A equals 5, B equals 5, and then A plus B, and then let's just select all of this and click run. Then we actually get it running this code in the console. So let's just now save it, and I'll get rid of this later. This will save in the directory I defined before, and we'll say Stephen's R script. A few other interesting things. The environment tells you what variables you actually have loaded into memory. The history tells you like your commands, your list of commands, and you can actually go back and click some of these. So like I can go A equals 5 and it will show in the console again. We won't worry too much about this, but there's actually, you can actually have some tutorials here as well. And at the bottom, this shows the files in the current directory. We've not done any plots yet. We'll show that later. And these are the packages. R has things called packages. The base package is loaded in, and this contains all the simple things like addition and basic statistics. But for certain techniques, you want to actually have new packages. So I'll show you how to kind of load, install and load in packages. We have a help file, and then we have a variable view, which again we'll see these as we go on. So those are just kind of the basics, and then I'll stop with this video, and then I'll actually start the coding for the class.